The sun blazed harsh and unforgiving over the endless prairie, painting the tall grass in shades of gold that would have been beautiful if Madeline Hayes hadn't been stumbling through it for the past 3 hours, her throat parched and her hopes dwindling with every step. The stagecoach had left her behind at the last stop when she'd wandered too far looking for wildflowers, and now she was paying the price for her momentary distraction. Montana Territory, 1876. Not the ideal place for a city-bred woman to find herself alone. Madeline's burgundy traveling dress, once crisp and proper, now hung in tatters around her ankles, torn by the razor-sharp edges of prairie grass. Her bonnet had long since blown away, leaving her chestnut hair tumbling down her back in wild disarray. The small carpetbag she clutched contained all that remained of her former life in Boston, a few personal items, letters from her late parents, and barely enough money to start anew. "Just keep walking," she whispered to herself, her voice cracking from thirst. "The next town can't be far." But the horizon showed nothing but more prairie, stretching endlessly under the merciless sun. Her vision began to blur, dark spots dancing before her eyes. Madeline felt her knees buckle. As the ground rushed up to meet her, she thought she heard hoofbeats in the distance, but that must be a hallucination, her mind playing tricks in her final moments. The last thing she felt was her body hitting the edge of the prairie, where the tall grass gave way to harder, sun-baked earth. Owen Mitchell had been tracking a small herd of wild mustangs for 3 days. As the finest horse wrangler in Cottonwood Springs, he had a reputation to maintain. The mustangs were headed north, and he was determined to capture at least the magnificent black stallion that led them. His own mount, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Copper, had proven his worth over the grueling chase. When he spotted something unusual at the edge of the tall grass, something that didn't belong in the natural landscape, Owen slowed Copper to a walk. As they drew closer, his eyes widened. "Hold up, boy," he murmured to his horse, swinging down from the saddle. A woman lay crumpled at the prairie's edge, her fine dress suggesting she was no local ranch hand's wife. Owen approached cautiously, then knelt beside her. She was breathing, thank God, but her skin burned with fever under the relentless sun. "Miss?" he called, gently turning her over. Her face, though smudged with dirt and reddened by the sun, was striking high cheekbones, delicate nose, and lips that would be full and expressive when not parched from dehydration. Owen didn't hesitate. The mustangs could wait. He uncorked his canteen and trickled a small amount of water between her lips. She coughed, her eyelids fluttering. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and gentle, the way he'd speak to a spooked horse. "You're safe." Her eyes opened fully deep brown, like rich soil after rain, and fixed on him with confusion. "The stagecoach?" she whispered. "It's gone, I reckon," Owen replied, helping her sit up slowly. "But I'm here now. Owen Mitchell, at your service, madam." She tried to sit up straighter, maintaining dignity despite her circumstances. "Madeline Hayes, I was traveling to Silver Creek." Owen's eyebrows rose. "Silver Creek's 30 miles north of here. You'd have died trying to walk it." He assessed her condition with experienced eyes. "Can you stand, Miss Hayes? My cabin's not far. You need shade and water before anything else." Madeline attempted to rise but swayed dangerously. Without a word, Owen swept her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She was too exhausted to protest as he lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist. "My bag," she murmured. "Got it," he assured her, the carpetbag tied to his saddle. As they rode toward his cabin, Owen couldn't help noticing how perfectly she fit against him, her head eventually resting on his shoulder as consciousness slipped away again. Something stirred in him, a protective instinct stronger than he'd felt before. For years, he'd lived contentedly alone, valuing his solitude. But with this woman in his arms, he suddenly felt the emptiness of his existence. What Owen Mitchell didn't realize was that in lifting Madeline Hayes from the edge of the prairie, he had found the missing piece of his life, though it would take time, trials, and tribulations before either of them would recognize this truth. Owen's cabin sat nestled in a small valley, protected from the harshest prairie winds by a stand of cottonwood trees. A creek gurgled nearby, providing fresh water year, round the reason he'd chosen this spot 3 years ago when he'd decided to settle. The cabin itself was modest but sturdy. built by his own hands. One main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom partitioned off at the back, and a covered porch where he spent evenings watching the sun set over the prairie. By the time they arrived, Madeline had regained some awareness, though she remained weak. Owen dismounted first, then carefully lifted her down. "This is your home?" she asked, her voice faint. "Such as it is," he replied, carrying her inside. "Not what you're used to, I expect." Despite its simplicity, the cabin was clean and orderly. Owen had never been one for mess. He placed Madeline gently on his bed, a handcrafted frame with a straw-filled mattress covered in surprisingly fine linens, one luxury he allowed himself. "Rest here. I'll fetch fresh water and see about some food." Madeline's eyes took in her surroundings, the solid log walls, the small window with actual glass panes, the neatly folded clothes on a shelf. This man was no ordinary cowboy. There was care in everything around her, attention to detail. Owen returned quickly with a pitcher of cool water from the creek. He poured some into a cup and helped her drink, supporting her head with a calloused but gentle hand. "Small sips," he advised. "Too much at once will make you sick." After she'd had enough water, he dampened a cloth and hesitated. "Your face is burned from the sun. This will help, but—" Understanding his reservation, Madeline took the cloth from him. "Thank you. I can manage." He nodded, relieved. "I'll prepare something to eat. You need strength." While Owen busied himself at the fireplace, stirring a pot of what smelled like beans and bacon, Madeline pressed the cool cloth to her face and considered her rescuer. He moved with quiet efficiency, his tall frame and broad shoulders suggesting strength, yet his actions conveyed gentleness. His face, tanned from years under the sun, was handsome in a rugged way, strong jawline covered with several days' worth of beard, straight nose, and eyes the color of a summer sky. His hair, the shade of wheat ready for harvest, curled slightly where it met his collar. "Have you lived here long?" she asked, breaking the silence. Owen glanced over his shoulder. 3 years on my own. Before that, I worked cattle drives from Texas to Montana. Got tired of the moving." "It's peaceful," she observed. A slight smile curved his lips. "Most days, less so with rustlers or when the weather turns. Winter can be hard out here alone." He served up a plate of beans. "It's not fancy, but it'll put strength back in you." Madeline ate slowly, savoring the simple but flavorful food. As her strength returned, so did her awareness of her predicament. She was alone in a cabin with a man she'd just met, miles from anywhere, her plans completely derailed. "Mr. Mitchell." "Owen," he corrected. "Out here, formalities don't mean much." "Owen," she amended. "I'm grateful for your help, truly. But I need to reach Silver Creek as soon as possible. I have a position waiting as the new school teacher." He nodded thoughtfully. "The town's been waiting on a teacher, but you're in no condition to travel today, or tomorrow either, I'd wager. But they're expecting me. Silver Creek will manage a few more days without learning." His tone was firm, but not unkind. "You push yourself now, you'll end up worse than when I found you." Frustration flashed across her face, but reason prevailed. "I suppose you're right. Rest today and tonight. Tomorrow, if you're stronger, we can talk about getting you to town." Owen stood, taking her empty plate. "I need to see to my horse and bring in more firewood. Will you be all right for a bit?" Madeline nodded, suddenly feeling exhaustion wash over her again. As Owen stepped outside, she sank back against the pillows, her mind whirling with questions about the man who had saved her life, and why the thought of reaching Silver Creek no longer seemed quite so urgent. When Madeline awoke, golden evening light was slanting through the cabin window. She sat up slowly, pleased to find her dizziness gone, though her muscles ached from her ordeal. The cabin was quiet, but the door stood slightly ajar, and she could hear movement outside. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, noticing that someone, Owen, obviously had placed a basin of fresh water, a small towel, and a comb on the nearby table. Her carpet bag sat beside it. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. After washing her face and hands, combing the tangles from her hair, and changing into her one clean dress of practical blue cotton, Madeline felt almost human again. She ventured outside onto the porch. Owen was at the corral beside the cabin, working with a spirited young horse. He moved with fluid grace, speaking in low tones to the animal as it pranced and tossed its head. Man and horse seemed engaged in a silent conversation, a negotiation of wills. Gradually, the horse calmed, finally allowing Owen to run a hand down its neck in approval. Only then did Owen notice Madeline watching. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps appreciation, before he secured the horse and approached the porch. "You're looking better," he observed, removing his hat. Without it shadowing his features, she could see him more clearly. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting in the sun, the straight brows, the mouth that seemed more accustomed to firmness than smiles. "I feel better, thanks to you," she replied. "You have a way with horses." A genuine smile transformed his face. "Horses make sense to me, always have. People are more complicated. Is that why you live out here alone?" He considered this as he leaned against the porch railing. "Partly. After the war, crowds made me uneasy. Too much noise, too many unexpected movements." He glanced toward the horizon. "Out here, there's space to breathe." "The war?" Madeline asked gently. 4 years with the Union cavalry. His tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate further. "You hungry? I caught some trout this morning." Accepting the change of subject, Madeline nodded. "I could eat, and I insist on helping. I'm not an invalid anymore." Owen didn't argue, and soon they worked together, preparing a simple but satisfying meal of pan-fried trout, potatoes, and wild greens Owen had gathered. As they ate on the porch, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, Madeline found herself sharing her own story, her parents' deaths from influenza 2 years earlier, the loss of their modest fortune to her father's business partner's embezzlement, and her decision to take the teaching position in Montana Territory. "Teaching's all I know," she explained, "and there aren't many respectable options for a woman alone." Owen listened attentively, asking occasional questions, but mostly allowing her to speak. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Takes courage to travel this far on your own," he finally said. "Most would have given up." His simple acknowledgement of her strength meant more than effusive praise would have. "I didn't have much choice." "There's always a choice," Owen countered. "You chose to fight rather than surrender. That says something about you." Madeline Hayes. The way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her. As darkness fell, Owen lit a lantern, its golden glow creating a small circle of light on the porch. Night sounds emerged, crickets chirping, an owl hooting in the distance, the soft nickering of horses in the corral. "It's beautiful here," Madeline said softly. Owen's eyes met hers in the lamplight. "It is tonight." The simple statement hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. After a moment, Owen stood. "You should rest. I'll sleep out here on the porch." "I can't take your bed." "You can and will," he said firmly. "You're still recovering." Too tired to argue, Madeline bid him good night and returned to the cabin. As she lay in Owen's bed, surrounded by the scent of him, leather, pine, and something uniquely male, she found herself wondering about the life he'd carved out here and why a man with so much to offer chose solitude. For his part, Owen stretched out on his bedroll on the porch, staring up at the star-filled sky. In just one day, his carefully ordered existence had been disrupted by a woman with determination in her eyes and strength in her spirit. Tomorrow, he would take her to Silver Creek, and his life would return to normal. Yet, as sleep claimed him, Owen Mitchell couldn't shake the feeling that normal might never be enough again. Morning brought clear skies and a cool breeze, perfect for traveling. Madeline emerged from the cabin to find Owen already up, frying bacon and brewing coffee over an outdoor fire. "Good morning," she called, fastening the last button on her traveling jacket somewhat wrinkled but serviceable. Owen glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "I can't thank you enough for everything." He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," Madeline said quietly. Their eyes met briefly before Owen turned back to the fire. "I figured we'd leave after breakfast. Should reach Silver Creek by mid-afternoon if we ride steady." "We? You don't think I'd send you off alone, do you?" He looked almost offended. "Besides, I need supplies from town anyway." Madeline smiled into her coffee cup. "Of course." After a hearty breakfast, Owen saddled 2 horses copper for himself and a gentle mare named Willow for Madeline. He secured her carpetbag behind her saddle, then stood back, assessing. "Can you ride in that dress?" Madeline smoothed the fabric. "It's not ideal, but I'll manage. I've ridden before, though it's been some time." Owen nodded, then offered his hand to help her mount. His touch lingered a moment longer than necessary, and when Madeline looked down at him from the saddle, something passed between them, a spark of connection neither had anticipated. Clearing his throat, Owen mounted Copper and led the way. They rode side by side when the trail allowed, Owen pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area. He seemed to know every hill and valley, every stream and stand of trees. His knowledge of the land and its creatures impressed Madeline, who had always lived in cities. "How did you learn so much about this place?" she asked, as they paused to rest the horses at midday. Owen handed her a strip of jerky from his saddlebag. "Learned from the crow when I first came out here. Old man named Two Hawks took a liking to me for some reason. Taught me how to read the land, track game, find water." His expression softened with remembrance. "Saved my life more than once." "You speak of him in the past tense." "Died 2 winters ago. Pneumonia." Owen's jaw tightened. Nearest doctor was in Silver Creek, too far in a blizzard. Madeline heard the guilt in his voice. "You couldn't have prevented it." "Maybe not," he conceded. "But it's why I started learning about medicines, herbs. Won't be caught helpless again." This revelation added another layer to her understanding of the complex man beside her. Owen Mitchell wasn't just a horse wrangler or a former cavalry soldier. He was a student of the land, constantly learning, adapting, preparing. As they continued their journey, the landscape gradually changed. The open prairie gave way to more varied terrain, rolling hills, copses of trees, and eventually signs of human habitation. Fenced fields, the occasional distant farmhouse, rutted wagon tracks forming a more defined road. "Almost there," Owen said as they crested a hill in late afternoon. Below them lay Silver Creek, larger than Madeline had expected, with several streets of wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the others, and scattered houses extending outward. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said, a mix of relief and trepidation in her voice. "Grown considerably in the last few years. Silver mine 10 miles west brought in workers, then their families. That's why they need a teacher." They rode down the hill and into town, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Madeline became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, her crumpled dress, and the fact that she was riding alongside a man who, despite his clean-shaven face and fresh shirt, still had the unmistakable air of a solitary frontiersman. Owen guided them to a 2-story building with a sign reading Silver Creek Hotel and Dining. He dismounted and helped Madeline down, his hands firm at her waist. "Town council meets here most days," he explained. "Mayor Blackwood should be inside. He'll know about your teaching position." As they climbed the steps to the hotel's porch, Madeline felt a sudden reluctance. In moments, she would begin her new life here, the life she had journeyed so far to claim. Yet standing beside Owen, she found herself wishing for just a little more time before facing this next chapter. Before she could voice these conflicting feelings, the hotel door swung open, and a portly, bewhiskered man in a suit stepped out, stopping short at the sight of them. "Mitchell, didn't expect to see you in town until the fall horse auction." His eyes shifted to Madeline, widening slightly. "And who might this be?" Owen removed his hat. "Mayor Blackwood, this is Miss Madeline Hayes, your new school teacher." The mayor's expression changed to one of surprise, then confusion. "School teacher? But Miss Hayes, we received word that you weren't coming. The stagecoach arrived yesterday without you. The driver reported you disappeared at the last stop." Madeline felt the blood drain from her face. "I got separated from the coach, yes, but I never intended—" "She was stranded," Owen interrupted. "I found her collapsed at the edge of the prairie, nearly died of exposure." Mayor Blackwood's bushy eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, this is unexpected. You see, when you didn't arrive, the council voted last night to accept another candidate who arrived on the same stage. A widow from Denver, Mrs. Eleanor Paxton. She's already been given the position and the schoolhouse residence." "But that's my position," Madeline protested. "I have a contract." She reached for her carpetbag, intending to produce the document. The mayor raised a placating hand. "I'm sure you did, Miss Hayes. But circumstances changed when you didn't arrive as scheduled. The children need teaching, and Mrs. Paxton was qualified and available." "She was delayed through no fault of her own," Owen said, his voice hardening. "Surely the council can reconsider." "I'm afraid the decision is made, Mitchell." Mayor Blackwood's tone was final. "Though we are in need of an assistant at the school, the enrollment has grown considerably. It wouldn't be the position you expected, Miss Hayes, and the pay would be less, but—" "Less pay?" Madeline interrupted, mental calculations already racing through her head. The original salary had been barely enough to live on. Less would mean genuine hardship. $30 a month, plus meals at the school during weekdays, the mayor offered. You would have to find your own lodging. However, Madeline fought to maintain her composure. After everything, the long journey, the loss of her possessions on the stagecoach, nearly dying on the prairie to arrive and find her position given away, was almost too much to bear. I need to consider this," she managed. Owen's hand came to rest supportively at the small of her back. "Is the boarding house still open?" he asked the mayor. "It is, though nearly full with minors. Mrs. Abernathy might have a small room available." Mayor Blackwood glanced between them, seemingly noticing their familiar stance. "Unless there's another arrangement I'm misunderstanding?" "Miss Hayes and I are acquaintances only," Owen said firmly. "I happened to find her in trouble and brought her to town, as any decent man would." The mayor nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. "Of course. Well, Miss Hayes, shall I tell Mrs. Abernathy to expect you?" Madeline straightened her shoulders. "Yes, please. And I would like to meet with Mrs. Paxton as soon as possible to discuss the assistant position." "Very well. I'll arrange it for tomorrow morning. The school is just down the street, can't miss it." With a nod to them both, Mayor Blackwood continued on his way. Once he was out of earshot, Madeline let out a shaky breath. "What am I going to do?" Owen's hand remained at her back, steady and warm. "First, get you settled at the boarding house. Then we'll figure out the rest." "We?" she questioned, meeting his eyes. Something in his gaze softened. "Unless you'd rather handle this alone." "No," Madeline admitted. "I wouldn't." Together they walked toward the boarding house, leading their horses, both aware that their brief journey together had just been unexpectedly extended, and neither entirely sorry about it. Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house was a neat two-story structure at the eastern end of town, with a well-tended garden and freshly painted shutters. The proprietress herself, a brisk woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and shrewd eyes, met them at the door. "So, you're the school teacher who didn't arrive," she said after introductions. "Caused quite a stir, you did. Half the town thought you'd been carried off by Indians or worse." "Nothing so dramatic," Madeline replied. "Just an unfortunate misunderstanding." Mrs. Abernathy's gaze shifted to Owen, standing a respectful distance behind Madeline. "Mitchell, rare to see you in town." He touched the brim of his hat. "Mrs. Abernathy." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, moving between them. "I have one room available, small, at the back of the house. $5 a week, includes breakfast and dinner." Madeline quickly calculated. At that rate, her reduced salary would barely cover room and board, with almost nothing left for other necessities. But she had no choice, at least, until she could secure better arrangements. "I'll take it," she said. "Payment in advance, weekly," Mrs. Abernathy stated. "House rules are simple. No gentlemen callers in rooms, no alcohol on the premises, quiet after 9 in the evening, and everyone attends Sunday services, I don't care which church, but attendance is mandatory." "Understood? Good. I'll show you up." Mrs. Abernathy glanced at Owen again. "You can say your goodbyes down here, Mitchell." As the older woman disappeared inside, Madeline turned to Owen. "Thank you again for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "No need," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "I'll be in town overnight, getting supplies. If you need anything, where will you stay?" "The livery stable has a room for travelers. I know the owner." Owen hesitated. "I could call on you tomorrow before you meet with the school council, if you'd like some company." The offer touched Madeline deeply. "I would, thank you." An awkward moment passed between them, both sensing this parting was more significant than it should be for people who'd known each other barely 2 days. "Mitchell, "Your horse is blocking my delivery wagon," a gruff voice called from the street. Owen grimaced. "Duty calls. Until tomorrow, Miss Hayes." "Madeline," she corrected softly. "After all we've been through, I think formalities are rather unnecessary." A small smile touched his lips. "Madeline, then. Rest well." As he led the horses away, Madeline watched him go, struck by the strange emptiness his departure created. Then, squaring her shoulders, she turned to face her new, unexpected reality. The room Mrs. Abernathy showed her was indeed small, barely fitting a narrow bed, a washstand, and a battered chest of drawers. But it was clean, with a window overlooking a vegetable garden, and after nearly dying on the prairie, Madeline wasn't inclined to complain. After washing away the dust of travel and changing into her last clean dress, she joined the other boarders for dinner, a filling if plain meal of beef stew, bread, and apple pie. Her fellow lodgers included 2 shop clerks, an elderly widow, and 3 miners who ate quickly and spoke little. All regarded her with undisguised curiosity, but Mrs. Abernathy's stern presence discouraged overly personal questions. After dinner, exhaustion claimed Madeline. As she lay in the unfamiliar bed, her thoughts drifted to Owen. What was he doing now? Would he really call tomorrow, or would he simply gather his supplies and return to his solitary existence? Their brief connection, nothing but a memory. The next morning brought steady rain, drumming against her window and turning Silver Creek's dirt streets to mud. After breakfast, Madeline borrowed an umbrella from Mrs. Abernathy and made her way to the schoolhouse, a simple but sturdy building at the edge of town. Inside, she found a woman in her 30s arranging books on shelves. Tall and slender, with auburn hair pulled into a practical bun, she turned at Madeline's entrance. "You must be Miss Hayes," she said, her voice pleasant if cautious. "Mayor Blackwood sent word you might be coming. I'm Eleanor Paxton." "Mrs. Paxton?" Madeline extended her hand. "I understand congratulations are in order." The woman accepted the handshake, looking slightly relieved at Madeline's cordial tone. "Thank you. Though I regret the circumstances, the mayor explained your situation." "It was unfortunate timing," Madeline acknowledged, determined to be gracious despite her disappointment. "But I understand the council's decision. Children need education, regardless of who provides it." Mrs. Paxton smiled, genuine warmth entering her expression. "Indeed they do. We have 37 pupils currently, ages 6 to 16. It's more than one teacher can manage effectively, especially with the varying levels of education. Some of the older children have had virtually no formal schooling. Hence the need for an assistant," Madeline said. "Precisely. I would focus on the older children, while you would take the younger ones. We would share the classroom. It's spacious enough, but works somewhat independently." Mrs. Paxton hesitated. "The salary is less than ideal, I know." "It's a challenge," Madeline admitted, "particularly with boarding house costs." The other woman nodded thoughtfully. "There might be a solution, if you're amenable. The schoolhouse includes living quarters, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a small parlor. The council allocated it to me, but it's more space than I need. If you were willing to share the accommodation, you could save on boarding costs." Madeline blinked in surprise. "You would do that?" "It makes practical sense," Mrs. Paxton replied with a small smile. "And I confess, after losing my husband last year, I find evenings alone rather difficult. Company would be welcome." Before Madeline could respond, the schoolhouse door opened again, admitting a rain-dampened Owen Mitchell. He removed his hat, rainwater dripping from its brim. "Pardon the interruption," he said. "I called at the boarding house, and Mrs. Abernathy directed me here." Mrs. Paxton looked between them with interest. "A friend of yours, Miss Hayes?" "Mr. Mitchell rescued me when I was stranded," Madeline explained. "Owen, this is Mrs. Eleanor Paxton, the new teacher." Owen nodded politely. "Madam." "Mr. Mitchell," Mrs. Paxton acknowledged. "Your reputation precedes you. I understand you supply many of the horses in this region." "Some," he confirmed modestly. An awkward silence fell. Mrs. Paxton, displaying perceptive tact, smiled. "I should prepare for my meeting with the school board. Miss Hayes, consider my offer. We can discuss details later." With a nod to them both, she retreated to a small office at the back of the classroom. Once alone, Owen moved closer to Madeline. "How are you faring?" "Better than expected," she replied. Mrs. Paxton has offered to share the schoolhouse living quarters. It would solve my housing dilemma. Generous of her. Yes. Madeline studied him. You look troubled. Owen glanced toward the windows, where rain continued to fall. Got word this morning. There's trouble at my place. Alarm shot through her. What kind of trouble? Neighbor rode in before dawn. Said he saw smoke from my direction yesterday evening. Could be nothing, a controlled burn by passing travelers. But with this rain... He left the implication hanging. Madeline understood immediately. No one would start a fire in the rain, which meant any smoke had occurred before the weather turned and might indicate something serious. You're leaving right away, she said. It wasn't a question. Owen nodded, his expression grim. Need to check. If someone's fired my cabin or harmed my horses... Of course you must go. Despite her understanding, disappointment welled within her. Will you return to town? Something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps, or something deeper. If I can. Depends what I find. The distance between them seemed suddenly vast. Their brief connection fragile in the face of real-world complications. Yet Madeline couldn't deny the pull she felt toward this solitary man, nor the concern now knotting her stomach. Be careful, she said softly. Owen's hand moved as if to reach for hers, then stopped. I've left something for you at the general store. Credit in your name? Enough to get you started here, whatever you decide. Owen, I couldn't possibly... You can and will, he said firmly, echoing his words from days before. Consider it payment for the fine company on the ride to town. Before she could protest further, he continued, I should go while there's daylight left. He settled his hat back on his head. Good luck with your new position, Madeline Hayes. The formality of her full name felt like a deliberate distancing. And good luck to you, Owen Mitchell. He held her gaze a moment longer, as if memorizing her features, then turned and strode out into the rain. Through the window, Madeline watched him mount Copper and ride away, his figure quickly disappearing into the gray curtain of rainfall. She pressed a hand to her chest, surprised by the ache there. In just a few days, a stranger had become someone whose absence left a void, and now he was riding back into danger, possibly never to return. Mrs. Paxton's voice broke into her thoughts. He seems a good man. Madeline turned, composing herself. He is. The older woman's perceptive eyes held understanding. Those are rare enough to be worth holding on to, Miss Hayes. Perhaps, Madeline acknowledged. But some men aren't meant to be held. With that, she turned her attention to the classroom, determined to focus on the future she could control, rather than the man riding away who had somehow claimed a piece of her heart in less than 3 days. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity for Madeline. She accepted Mrs. Paxton's offer to share the schoolhouse quarters, moved her meager belongings from the boarding house, and threw herself into her new role as assistant teacher. The younger children responded well to her patient instruction, and she found unexpected satisfaction in watching their progress. Eleanor Paxton proved to be an excellent housemate and colleague, intelligent, considerate, and possessed of a dry wit that emerged once they became better acquainted. In the evenings, they would sit in the small parlor, grading papers and planning lessons, occasionally sharing stories of their previous lives. Yet despite her busy days and pleasant companionship, Madeline's thoughts frequently drifted to Owen. No word had come from him, though she'd made discreet inquiries. The storekeeper confirmed that Owen had indeed left credit for her, a surprisingly generous amount that she'd reluctantly drawn upon for necessities, but had no information about his welfare or whereabouts. Thinking of your cowboy again? Eleanor asked one evening, catching Madeline staring absently out the window. Madeline smiled ruefully. Is it that obvious? Only to someone paying attention. Eleanor set aside her knitting. You know, in the short time I've been here, I've heard interesting things about Owen Mitchell. Oh? Madeline tried to sound merely curious rather than eager. Apparently, he's something of a local legend, not just for his skill with horses, but for his integrity. Mayor Blackwood told me that 3 winters ago, when blizzards cut the town off from supply routes, Mitchell rode through impossible conditions to bring medicine for a diphtheria outbreak, saved 12 children. That sounds like him, Madeline said softly. He's also refused multiple offers to sell his land to the mining company, despite substantial sums being offered. And he once tracked down a man who'd stolen a widow's life savings, retrieved every penny, and returned it without taking a reward. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Quite the knight in dusty buckskins, it seems. Why are you telling me this? Because, Eleanor said gently, such men are worth waiting for, even if they're slow to recognize what's right in front of them. Before Madeline could respond, a knock at their door interrupted the conversation. Eleanor rose to answer it, returning moments later with a weather-beaten envelope. For you, she said, handing it to Madeline. A crow messenger brought it. Wouldn't say who sent him, just that he'd ridden all day to deliver it. Madeline's heart raced as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting bold but neat. Cabin standing, horses safe, trouble resolved, but complications remain. When settled, we'll return to town. Save some arithmetic for me. No signature, but none was needed. Owen was alive, his property intact. Relief washed through her, followed by renewed concern. What complications kept him away? And why send a messenger rather than come himself? The following Sunday after church services, Madeline got her answer. As she and Eleanor walked back toward the schoolhouse, Sheriff Cooper intercepted them. Miss Hayes, might I have a word? Of course, Sheriff. Madeline nodded to Eleanor to continue without her. The sheriff, a grizzled man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a perpetually skeptical expression, led her a few steps away from the churchgoers. Got word about Mitchell, he said without preamble. Thought you'd want to know. Madeline's pulse quickened. Is he all right? More or less. Seems some rustlers tried to take his horses. He interrupted them, there was gunfire. Mitchell took a bullet to the shoulder, but managed to drive them off. He's been shot? Alarm sharpened her voice. Wounded, not critical. Problem is, one of the rustlers was the brother of Jack Harmon. The name meant nothing to Madeline. I don't understand. Sheriff Cooper's expression darkened. Jack Harmon runs the biggest ranch north of here. Thinks he owns everything and everyone. His brother Lyle's been trouble for years, drinking, fighting, stealing. If Mitchell shot him, even defending his own property, Harmon will want revenge. But surely the law's complicated out here, Miss Hayes. Harmon has influence with the territorial judge, and he has men who'll do whatever he asks, legal or not. Understanding dawned. The complications Owen mentioned. The sheriff nodded. Mitchell's holed up at his place with some Crow friends standing guard. Smart move. Harmon's men won't tangle with the Crow if they can help it. But he can't stay there forever, Madeline protested. No, he can't. Sheriff Cooper sighed. I'm riding out there tomorrow to get statements. Try to defuse the situation. Harmon's brother is alive, though wounded pretty bad. If he recovers, maybe tempers will cool. I want to go with you, Madeline said firmly. The sheriff's bushy eyebrows rose. That wouldn't be wise, Miss Hayes. It's a dangerous situation, and your presence might complicate matters. Nevertheless, I'm going. Her tone brooked no argument. I'm a good rider, Sheriff, and I won't be a burden. But I need to see for myself that he's all right. Sheriff Cooper studied her for a long moment, then shook his head in resignation. Be at the livery at dawn, bring food and water for a full day, and wear something practical, not church clothes. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet, he muttered. Mitchell might not be pleased to see you riding into his troubles. Madeline lifted her chin. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold as Madeline arrived at the livery stable. She had borrowed riding clothes from Eleanor, a divided skirt and sturdy jacket that allowed for comfortable horseback travel, and packed provisions as instructed. Sheriff Cooper was already there, saddling a large bay gelding. Still determined to come? He asked, eyeing her practical attire with approval. Absolutely, she confirmed. The livery owner, a lanky man named Peterson, led out a gentle-looking mare. This here's Daisy, not flashy, but sure-footed and steady. She'll get you there and back without fuss. Once mounted, they set out, leaving Silver Creek behind as the sun climbed higher. The journey would take most of the day, the sheriff explained, with a brief stop at midday to rest the horses. As they rode, Sheriff Cooper shared more about the situation with Jack Harmon. The rancher had been gradually expanding his holdings for years, using methods both legal and questionable. Owen's land, with its reliable water source and strategic location, was particularly coveted. Mitchell's refused to sell repeatedly, the sheriff explained. Harmon doesn't take rejection well. This incident with his brother gives him the excuse he's been looking for to apply pressure. You think the rustling attempt wasn't random? Madeline asked, connecting the pieces. Nothing Harmon does is random. Cooper's expression was grim. Can't prove he sent his brother to stir up trouble, but I'd bet my badge on it. By late afternoon, the landscape had become familiar to Madeline, the rolling prairie giving way to the small valley where Owen's cabin nestled among cottonwood trees. As they approached, she noticed changes. A makeshift corral now held more horses than before, and smoke rose from not just the cabin chimney, but from several small campfires outside. 3 men on horseback intercepted them before they reached the property. 2 Crow warriors and a white man Madeline didn't recognize. All were armed and watchful. "Sheriff," the white man acknowledged, then his eyes moved to Madeline with surprise. "Sam," Cooper nodded. "This is Miss Hayes. She's a friend of Mitchell's. We've come to check on him and get statements about the rustling incident." Sam's weathered face remained impassive. "Mitchell's up and around, more or less. Follow me." As they rode into the clearing, Madeline saw the full extent of the situation. At least a dozen men, mostly Crow, with a few white frontiersmen mixed in, were positioned around the property. The atmosphere was tense, vigilant. And then she saw him. Owen stood on the porch of his cabin, his left arm in a sling, his face thinner and paler than when she'd last seen him. But he was alive, standing on his own 2 feet. And the relief that swept through her was so powerful she nearly swayed in the saddle. His eyes found hers immediately, widening in disbelief. He stepped off the porch, moving toward her as she dismounted. "Madeline, what are you doing here?" His voice was rough with fatigue, but there was no mistaking the concern, and underneath it, something warmer. "I heard you were shot," she said simply. "I had to see for myself that you were all right." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the distance of weeks falling away. Then Owen turned to the sheriff. "Cooper, didn't expect company. Need your statement about what happened with Lyle Harmon. Figured it was time to sort this mess out." The sheriff dismounted, stretching his back. "Got a place we can talk?" Owen nodded toward the cabin. "Inside." His eyes returned to Madeline. "You shouldn't have come. It's not safe." "I'm already here," she pointed out, "and I'm not leaving until I know exactly what's happening." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Still stubborn?" "Still right," she countered. One of the Crow warriors approached, saying something to Owen in his native language. Owen replied in kind, then turned to Madeline. "Two Hawk's son, Gray Wolf. He says you're welcome here. The women are preparing food by the creek. You might be more comfortable there while the sheriff and I talk." Madeline hesitated, reluctant to be separated from Owen now that she'd found him. But she recognized the need for the men to speak privately. "All right, but afterwards, you and I need to talk." Owen's expression softened slightly. "We will. I promise." As Gray Wolf led her toward the creek, Madeline glanced back to see Owen watching her go, his face a complex mixture of emotions that mirrored her own confused heart. The Crow women welcomed Madeline with quiet dignity, offering her a place by their cooking fire and a wooden bowl of rich stew. Though they spoke little English and she no Crow, they communicated through gestures and expressions, their initial reserve warming as they realized her genuine concern for Owen. An older woman, her face lined with the wisdom of years, seemed particularly interested in Madeline. Through a younger woman who spoke some English, she asked pointed questions about Madeline's relationship with Mitchell, as they all called him. "He saved my life," Madeline explained, keeping it simple. "We became friends." The older woman, whose name Madeline understood to be Singing Bird, made a sound that needed no translation skepticism mixed with amusement. She said something that made the other women laugh. The translator smiled. "She says Mitchell never brings women to his land. You are first. She thinks maybe not just friends." Heat rose in Madeline's cheeks. "It's not like that. He helped me when I was in trouble. That's all." Singing Bird spoke again, her dark eyes knowing. "She says trouble shows what is in heart, like fire shows gold from rock." Before Madeline could respond, she noticed movement near the cabin. Owen and Sheriff Cooper had emerged and were walking toward the creek, deep in conversation. As they approached, the Crow women respectfully moved away, leaving Madeline alone by the fire. Owen looked exhausted but determined as he sat beside her, his movements careful to avoid jarring his injured shoulder. Sheriff Cooper remained standing, his expression troubled. "Situation's complicated," the sheriff began without preamble. "Lyle Harmon's still alive, but barely. If he dies, his brother will claim murder, regardless of the circumstances." "It was self-defense," Owen stated flatly. "He and his men were stealing my horses and fired first." "I believe you," Cooper assured him. "But Jack Harmon has the ear of Judge Wilkins. And even if the law sides with you eventually, Harmon might take matters into his own hands before that happens." Madeline looked between them. "What does this mean for Owen's safety?" The sheriff sighed. "Means he should stay here with protection for now. Crow warriors won't let Harmon's men near the property. But long term," he shook his head, "can't stay under siege forever." "What about coming to town?" Madeline suggested. "Surely Harmon wouldn't attempt anything in Silver Creek, with witnesses and the law present." "Maybe, maybe not," Cooper said. "Harmon's got men in town too. And a bullet in the back on a dark street doesn't need many witnesses." The stark reality of the danger Owen faced hit Madeline with full force. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding or temporary setback. It was a potentially deadly feud with a powerful adversary. "There must be something we can do," she insisted. Owen's good hand found hers, his calloused fingers wrapping around her smaller ones. The simple touch sent warmth through her, despite the gravity of the situation. "Cooper's going to talk to the territorial marshal," he said. "See if we can get official intervention. Until then, I stay put." The sheriff nodded. "I'll head back to town first thing tomorrow. Miss Hayes, you'll return with me." "No," she said immediately. "I'm staying." "Madeline," Owen began, but she cut him off. "I have a week before school resumes after harvest break. I'm not leaving you alone in this situation." "You wouldn't be alone," Sheriff Cooper pointed out. "He's got a dozen armed men watching his back." "Nevertheless, I'm staying," she repeated firmly, "unless Owen specifically asks me to leave." Both men stared at her Cooper with exasperation. Owen with a mixture of concern and something else, something that made her heart beat faster despite the circumstances. "It's not safe," Owen said finally. "Nowhere is entirely safe," Madeline countered, "and I can be useful here. I notice your provisions could use organizing, your cabin needs attention, and that wound should be properly cleaned and dressed daily." She raised an eyebrow in challenge. "Unless you'd prefer to continue neglecting all three?" A reluctant smile tugged at Owen's mouth. "You haven't changed." "Neither have you," she returned softly. Sheriff Cooper looked between them, then threw up his hands in surrender. "Fine, stay. But when I return for you in a week, you're coming back to town, regardless of the situation here. The children need their teacher." "Agreed," Madeline said, as the sheriff walked away muttering about stubborn women and fool notions. Owen's fingers tightened around Madeline's. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For coming. For staying." His blue eyes held hers, open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "For caring." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. "I couldn't stay away once I heard you were hurt," she admitted. "I've been worried since the day you left town." Owen's expression softened. "I meant to return sooner. Wanted to. But then, I understand," she assured him. "And now, we have a week to sort this out, together." As the sun set over the prairie, casting long shadows across Owen's land, they sat by the fire, hand in hand, drawing strength from each other's presence while uncertainty still loomed on the horizon. That night, Madeline slept in Owen's cabin while he insisted on taking a bedroll outside, with the men keeping watch. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully as she processed the day's revelations and the danger that threatened the man who had become inexplicably important to her in such a short time. The next morning brought renewed purpose. While Owen met with Grey Wolf and the other men to discuss security arrangements, Madeline tackled the cabin. Weeks of bachelor living combined with Owen's injury had left the place in disarray. She swept, scrubbed, organized provisions, and aired bedding, transforming the space back into the orderly home she remembered. By midday, she had moved on to meal preparation, using the stores available to create a hearty stew that could feed not just Owen, but several of the men keeping watch. The simple domestic tasks grounded her, giving her a sense of contribution in a situation where she otherwise felt helpless. Owen found her chopping vegetables at the rough wooden table. He stood in the doorway watching her, a strange expression on his face. "What?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Nothing," he said softly. "Just never expected to see you here like this. In my home." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words. "Is it unwelcome?" "No," he said quickly. "The opposite." He moved into the cabin, his injured arm still in its sling, but his movements more confident than the day before. "You've been busy." "It needed doing," she replied, resuming her chopping. "How's your shoulder?" "Healing. Grey Wolf's mother knows medicine. She's been treating it with some herb poultice that smells terrible but seems to help." "Singing bird?" "Yes, she strikes me as formidable." Owen raised an eyebrow. "You've met?" "We shared a meal yesterday. She had opinions about my presence here." A flush crept up Owen's neck. "The crow can be direct." "Indeed," Madeline smiled slightly. She seemed to think there was more between us than friendship. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken possibilities. Owen moved closer until he stood beside her at the table. "And what did you tell her?" he asked, his voice low. Madeline set down her knife, turning to face him fully. "That you saved my life, that we became friends." She hesitated, then added softly, "That I couldn't stay away when I heard you were hurt." "Is that all we are, Madeline? Friends?" His blue eyes searched hers, vulnerable yet hopeful. Her heart raced. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything happened so quickly. We barely know each other. And yet, he echoed, understanding in his gaze. Before she could respond, a shout came from outside. Owen immediately tensed, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. "Stay here," he ordered, striding to the door. But Madeline was right behind him as he stepped onto the porch. Several of the Crow warriors were mounted, pointing toward the horizon where a dust cloud indicated approaching riders. "How many?" Owen called to Grey Wolf. "5, maybe 6, came the reply. "Coming slow, not trying to hide." Owen's expression hardened. "Could be Harmon's men." "Or the sheriff returning with news," Madeline suggested, though she knew it was unlikely so soon. "Either way, get back inside," Owen insisted. "I will not hide while you face potential danger," she protested. Before they could argue further, Grey Wolf rode closer. "Not Harmon," he reported. "Army, blue coats." Owen's surprise matched Madeline's. "The cavalry? Here?" As the riders drew nearer, Madeline could indeed make out the distinctive blue uniforms of U.S. cavalry soldiers. They approached at an unhurried pace, clearly not intending hostility. The leader, a captain by his insignia, reined in his horse at a respectful distance and saluted. "Mitchell? Captain James Thornton, Fort Kearney. We're looking for Owen Mitchell." Owen stepped forward. "I'm Mitchell." "Sir, I have orders from the territorial marshal to investigate reports of armed conflict in this region." The captain's eyes moved over the gathered Crow warriors, then back to Owen. "It seems the reports were accurate." "There's been no conflict here today, Captain," Owen replied carefully. "My friends are helping protect my property after a rustling attempt last week." Captain Thornton dismounted, handing his reins to a subordinate. "May we speak privately, Mr. Mitchell?" The marshal sent specific instructions. Owen hesitated, then nodded. "My cabin." As the men moved inside, Madeline caught Owen's glance, a silent request for her to stay with the Crow. Reluctantly, she complied, watching anxiously as the cabin door closed behind them. Nearly an hour passed before Owen and the captain emerged. Both men looked solemn, but no longer tense. Owen sought Madeline immediately, gesturing for her to join them. "Captain Thornton, this is Miss Madeline Hayes," he introduced. "She's a dear friend." The slight pause before friend sent an unexpected thrill through Madeline despite the circumstances. "Miss Hayes." The captain tipped his hat politely. "Mr. Mitchell has explained the situation. It seems Jack Harmon has finally overstepped his bounds." "How so?" Madeline asked. The marshal has been building a case against Harmon for months: land fraud, intimidation, suspected rustling operations. The attack on Mr. Mitchell's property, combined with witness statements from the Crow about Harmon's previous threats, provides the evidence needed to act. Hope flared in Madeline's chest. So, Owen is no longer in danger? Not immediately, the captain hedged. We're placing Harmon under military arrest pending investigation. His men will be watched closely. However, he turned to Owen, the marshal suggests you consider relocating temporarily, at least until the legal proceedings conclude. Leave my land? Owen's jaw tightened. That's exactly what Harmon wants. Temporarily, Captain Thornton emphasized. A few weeks, perhaps a month. The Crow have agreed to watch your property in your absence. Grey Wolf, who had joined them, nodded. We will guard. No one takes Mitchell's horses or burns his home. Owen's expression remained troubled, but he nodded. Where does the marshal suggest I go? Silver Creek would be ideal, the captain replied. The military will maintain a presence there until Harmon's case is resolved. You would be under our protection, yet close enough to return here if needed. Madeline's heart leapt at the prospect. Owen, in Silver Creek, safe from Harmon's threats. Before she could speak, however, Owen voiced the practical concern. And where would I stay in Silver Creek? The hotel's expensive for a long-term stay, and I have limited funds. Captain Thornton looked uncomfortable. The marshal didn't specify accommodations, only location. He could stay at the schoolhouse, Madeline said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. There's a small storage room off the kitchen that could be converted to a bedroom. It would be modest, but I couldn't impose, Owen interrupted. It wouldn't be an imposition, she insisted. Mrs. Paxton and I have the 2 main bedrooms. The storage room is separate, with its own entrance from the back porch. You would have privacy, yet be under the same roof for safety. The captain looked between them, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. That sounds like a practical solution, if Mrs. Paxton agrees. She will, Madeline said confidently. Eleanor is very practical about such matters. Owen studied her face, his expression a mixture of reluctance and something warmer. You're sure? Absolutely, she replied, holding his gaze steadily. After a long moment, Owen turned back to the captain. When do we leave? First light tomorrow, Thornton answered. We'll escort you directly to Silver Creek. As preparations began for the journey, Owen giving instructions to Grey Wolf about the care of his horses, the captain organizing his men for the escort, Madeline found herself simultaneously relieved and anxious. Owen would be safer in town, yes, but their relationship would be under the scrutiny of the entire community. Whatever was growing between them would no longer have the privacy of this isolated valley. That evening, after the Crow had retired to their camps and the soldiers to their temporary bivouac, Owen and Madeline sat alone on the porch of his cabin. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky, a cool breeze carrying the scent of pine and prairie grass. Are you sure about this arrangement in town? Owen asked finally, breaking the comfortable silence. It could cause talk. People will talk regardless, Madeline replied. They already are, according to Eleanor. The school teacher and the solitary horse wrangler who rescued her on the prairie. It's the most interesting gossip Silver Creek has had in months. A smile touched his lips. And that doesn't bother you? Your reputation. My reputation is that of a respectable teacher who shows proper gratitude to her rescuer, she interrupted. Besides, Eleanor will be there as chaperone. No one can object to the arrangement on moral grounds. Owen nodded slowly. And when this is over, when Harmon is dealt with and I return here? The question hung between them, laden with meaning. Madeline took a deep breath. That depends, she said softly. On what? She turned to face him fully, gathering her courage. On whether you want me to stay in your life, Owen Mitchell, because I've discovered that I very much want you to stay in mine. The vulnerability in her admission left her heart pounding. For a moment, Owen simply looked at her, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. Then his good hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining. When I found you at the edge of the prairie, he said, his voice low and intense, I thought I was just helping someone in need. I didn't realize I was finding the piece of myself I never knew was missing. He squeezed her hand. These weeks apart showed me that. The cabin felt empty without you, even though you were only here for a day. Joy bloomed in Madeline's chest, warm and expanding. So when this is over, Owen continued, we'll figure out what comes next, together. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I'm not good with words, Madeline, never have been. But I know what I feel, and it's something I've never felt before. I feel it too, she whispered, leaning closer. In the silver moonlight, with the prairie stretching endlessly around them, Owen Mitchell kissed Madeline Hayes for the first time, a gentle, questioning touch that deepened as she responded. His good arm wrapped around her, drawing her closer. And in that moment, all the uncertainty of their situation faded away, leaving only the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it as one. The journey to Silver Creek the next morning was uneventful, if emotionally complex. Owen had bid farewell to his Crow friends with promises to return when it was safe, entrusting his beloved horses and property to their care. The ride itself was pleasant enough, with Captain Thornton and his men providing both protection and respectful distance, allowing Owen and Madeline to talk quietly as they traveled. Their arrival in town, however, created exactly the stir Madeline had anticipated. Townsfolk stopped in the street to watch the procession, a cavalry detachment escorting Owen Mitchell and the schoolteacher's assistant, both looking travel-worn but strangely content despite the circumstances. By the time they reached the schoolhouse, Madeline knew gossip would be spreading like wildfire. Eleanor Paxton, bless her practical soul, took the situation in stride. After Captain Thornton explained the circumstances, she didn't hesitate to agree to the proposed living arrangement. The storage room is dusty but sound, she told Owen. With a proper bed and some organization, it should serve adequately until this matter is resolved. I'm grateful, Mrs. Paxton, Owen replied with genuine appreciation. I'll earn my keep repairs around the schoolhouse, chopping wood, whatever's needed. Eleanor smiled knowingly. I'm sure you will, Mr. Mitchell. Now, why don't you and Madeline get settled while I prepare some tea? You both look exhausted. The storage room was indeed dusty, but had potential a small window, providing light and ventilation, solid walls, and a separate entrance as Madeline had described. With Eleanor's help, they cleared space, brought in a narrow bed from the school's infirmary, and made the room habitable, if Spartan. As they worked, the reality of their new arrangement began to settle in. Owen Mitchell, solitary horseman, former cavalry soldier, man of the open prairie confined to a small room behind a schoolhouse in town. Madeline couldn't help wondering if he would come to resent the constraints, and by extension, her. That evening, as she prepared for bed in her own room, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Owen standing there, looking uncertain. Everything all right? She asked quietly, conscious of Eleanor in the next room. Fine, he assured her. Just wanted to say goodnight properly. His eyes searched hers. And to thank you for all of this. You don't need to thank me, Owen. I do, he insisted. You've upended your life for me, twice now. Madeline smiled softly. Perhaps that says something about how important you've become to me. His expression warmed. Perhaps it does. He hesitated, then leaned in to place a gentle kiss on her cheek. Good night, Madeline Hayes. Good night, Owen Mitchell. As she closed the door, Madeline pressed her fingers to her cheek where his lips had touched, a smile curving her mouth. Whatever challenges lay ahead, this moment, this connection was worth fighting for. The next few days established a new routine. Madeline resumed her teaching duties while Owen divided his time between helping around the schoolhouse and meeting with Sheriff Cooper and Captain Thornton about Jack Harmon's case. News arrived that Lyle Harmon was recovering from his wounds, which eased some of the tension surrounding potential murder charges. On the third evening, as they sat in the schoolhouse parlor after Eleanor had retired, Owen shared the latest developments. The marshals built a strong case, he said, his voice low to avoid disturbing their hostess. Harmon's been formally charged with conspiracy, attempted theft, and fraud related to land deals north of here. His brothers admitted their plan to steal my horses was his idea, but that Jack knew about it. That's good news, isn't it? Madeline asked, setting aside her lesson plans. It is, Owen confirmed, but these legal proceedings take time. Could be weeks before it's resolved, maybe months. The implication hung in the air, weeks or months before Owen could safely return to his land. Weeks or months of this limbo existence. "You're restless," she observed. He smiled ruefully. "That obvious?" "To me, yes." Madeline moved to sit beside him on the small sofa. "I know this arrangement isn't ideal for you. Being confined to town, away from your horses and land." "It's not just that," Owen admitted, taking her hand. "It's being so close to you, yet having to maintain proper distance because of our living arrangement. Having to be careful of appearances, of Eleanor's comfort, of the town's perceptions." "I know," Madeline sighed. "I feel it too." They sat in silence for a moment, fingers intertwined, the weight of unspoken desires between them. Finally, Owen spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about the future, Madeline, about what happens after Harmon is dealt with." Her heart quickened. And I don't want to return to my land alone." His blue eyes held hers, earnest and vulnerable. "I want you with me, as my wife." The words hung in the air, momentous yet somehow inevitable. Madeline felt tears spring to her eyes. "Owen, I know it's sudden," he rushed on. "I know we've known each other barely a month in total. But I've never been more certain of anything. When I'm with you, I feel complete in a way I never have before. And when we're apart, there's an emptiness that nothing else can fill." Madeline raised a hand to cup his cheek, her touch gentle. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "It defies logic or explanation. But from the moment you lifted me from the edge of the prairie, something inside me recognized you, as if my soul had been waiting for yours without my knowing it." Relief and joy washed over Owen's face. "Then you will? You'll marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Though there are practical matters to consider. My teaching position, we'll figure it out," he promised. "My land is only a half-day's ride from town. Maybe you could still teach, staying in town during the week if necessary. Or perhaps the school would accept a married teacher living outside town, or—" He stopped, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you'd prefer to live in town permanently, I could sell my land, buy a house here." "No," Madeline said firmly. "Your land is part of who you are, Owen. I would never ask you to give that up. We'll find a solution that works for both of us." He pulled her close, mindful of his still healing shoulder. "I love you, Madeline Hayes. Have since that first day, I think, though I was too stubborn to recognize it. And I love you, Owen Mitchell," she whispered against his lips. Enough to face whatever comes next, together. Their kiss sealed the promise tender at first, then deepening with the certainty of their commitment. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling, the future suddenly bright with possibilities, despite the current uncertainties. The next morning, they shared their news with Eleanor, who embraced them both with genuine delight. "I knew it from the moment you spoke of him," she told Madeline. "There was something in your voice that gave you away." To Owen she added with mock severity, "I expect you to make an honest woman of her promptly, Mr. Mitchell. No long engagements while legal matters drag on." "No, madam," he agreed, smiling. "As soon as it's safe for me to return to my land, we'll wed." "Before then, if necessary," Eleanor said firmly. "A wedding can happen here in town, with the proper precautions for your safety." The idea took root, and within days plans were underway for a simple ceremony at the Silver Creek Church the following Sunday. The announcement was met with enthusiasm from the townspeople, who had watched the unfolding drama with keen interest. Many had been touched by the romance of the Prairie rescue and subsequent events. Even Sheriff Cooper, gruff as ever, offered his congratulations. "About time you settled down, Mitchell," he said. "Just make sure Harmon's locked up tight before you say your vows. Don't need that trouble on your wedding day." The sheriff's words proved prophetic. 3 days before the wedding, as preparations were in full swing, Captain Thornton arrived at the schoolhouse with concerning news. "Jack Harmon escaped custody last night," he reported grimly. "Killed a guard and fled north. We have men tracking him, but he knows this territory better than most." The color drained from Madeline's face. "He'll come after Owen." "Possibly," the captain acknowledged. "Or he might make for the border to escape prosecution entirely. Either way, we're increasing security in town, especially around the schoolhouse." Owen's expression hardened. I won't hide while that man threatens everything I care about. No one's asking you to hide, Thornton assured him, but rushing off half-cocked won't help either. For now, stay in town where we can protect you and Miss Hayes. The tension of the next 2 days was nearly unbearable. Cavalry patrols circled Silver Creek constantly, while Owen chafed at the restrictions placed on his movements. Madeline continued teaching, though her mind was often elsewhere, startling at every unexpected sound. The night before their wedding, as Madeline sat at her dressing table brushing her hair, a soft tap came at her window. Her heart leapt to her throat before she recognized Owen's silhouette. She quickly opened the window. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "If Eleanor hears—" "She's visiting Mrs. Abernathy for tea," Owen replied, his expression grave. "I needed to speak with you privately." Something in his tone alarmed her. "What is it?" "I received word from Grey Wolf. Harmon was seen near my land yesterday." Madeline's blood ran cold. "The captain should be told immediately." "I've already informed him. They're sending men, but—" Owen hesitated. "Madeline, I need to go." "No," she protested. "It's too dangerous." "And our wedding—" "Will happen," he assured her, taking her hands. "But I can't marry you with this threat hanging over us. I need to know you'll be safe." Tears filled her eyes. "And I need to know the same about you. Please, Owen, let the cavalry handle Harmon." "They don't know the land like I do," he argued gently. "I'm not planning to confront him just to help track him. Captain Thornton agrees it makes strategic sense." "When?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Tonight. A small detachment, and I will leave after midnight." He squeezed her hands. "With luck, we'll find him quickly, and I'll be back for our wedding. If not, we postpone," Madeline finished for him. "I won't marry you while you're in danger, Owen Mitchell." His expression softened. "I'm coming back to you, Madeline Hayes." "That's a promise." He leaned through the window to kiss her, a desperate, passionate kiss that held both promise and farewell. When they parted, both were breathing hard, emotion thick between them. "I love you," he whispered. "And I love you," she replied. "Come back to me." With a final touch to her cheek, Owen disappeared into the darkness, leaving Madeline alone with her fears and prayers for his safe return. The night passed in agonizing slowness for Madeline. She didn't bother trying to sleep, instead sitting by her window, watching for any sign of activity. Eleanor, returning from her visit, immediately sensed something amiss and sat with her for hours, offering silent support. Dawn broke gray and misty, unusual weather for the season. As Madeline prepared for her school day, the wedding not scheduled until Sunday, 2 days hence, Sheriff Cooper arrived with news. "The cavalry's engaged with Harmon," he reported. "Found him near Mitchell's property, just as suspected. There was gunfire. That's all we know so far." "Owen?" Madeline asked, her voice tight with fear. "No word specifically," the sheriff admitted, "but Mitchell knows those hills better than anyone. If anyone can come through this safely, it's him." The day passed in a blur of anxiety. Madeline taught her lessons mechanically, her mind far away with Owen. Children's questions went unanswered. Simple arithmetic problems had to be explained multiple times. By afternoon, Eleanor gently suggested she go home early. "You're no good to anyone in this state," she said kindly. "Go rest. I'll finish the day." Grateful, Madeline returned to the schoolhouse, only to find Captain Thornton waiting on the porch. His uniform was dusty, his expression grim. "Miss Hayes," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I've just returned from the pursuit of Harmon." Fear clutched at her heart. "Owen? Is he—" "Alive," the captain assured her quickly. "But wounded. Harmon ambushed our party near a ravine on Mitchell's land. Mitchell took a bullet to the leg before Harmon fled deeper into the hills." "How serious is it?" Madeline asked, her mind racing. "Serious enough that he couldn't continue the pursuit, but not life-threatening." Thornton hesitated. "He's being brought back to town now, along with the crow healer, Singing Bird, who insisted on treating him." "When will they arrive?" "By nightfall, I expect. He asked me to tell you he's sorry about the wedding." Tears welled in Madeline's eyes. But she blinked them back. "The wedding doesn't matter. Only that he's alive." The captain nodded, understanding. "Harmon's still at large, but he's wounded too. It's just a matter of time before we find him." As darkness fell, Madeline paced the schoolhouse parlor, jumping at every sound. Eleanor had given up trying to distract her and simply kept the fire burning and tea hot, ready for Owen's arrival. Finally, near midnight, the sound of approaching horses broke the silence. Madeline rushed to the door, flinging it open to see a small procession, 2 cavalry soldiers, Singing Bird riding proudly on a paint pony, and Owen, pale but upright on copper, his left leg bandaged and splinted. "Owen!" she cried, running down the steps. Despite his injury, he slid from the saddle to meet her, grimacing in pain, but arms opening to receive her embrace. Madeline threw herself against his chest, tears flowing freely now. "You're alive," she whispered against his neck. "You're alive." "Told you I'd come back," he murmured, his good arm tight around her waist. "Though not quite as I planned." Singing Bird dismounted, saying something in Crow that made Owen smile despite his pain. "What did she say?" Madeline asked, drawing back to look at his face. "That a warrior returns to his woman even with arrows in his heart," he translated, "and that you should stop crying and help me inside before I fall over." With assistance from the soldiers, they got Owen settled in the parlor, his injured leg elevated on cushions. Singing Bird examined the wound again, applied fresh herbs, and rewrapped it, all the while speaking to Owen in a mixture of Crow and broken English that seemed to contain equal parts medical advice and scolding. Once she was satisfied with his treatment, Singing Bird accepted the offer of a bed for the night and retired with Eleanor, leaving Owen and Madeline alone. "What happened?" Madeline asked, sitting beside him and taking his hand. Owen sighed, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "Harmon was waiting for us. Must have guessed we'd come. He fired from cover, hit me before we even saw him. The cavalry returned fire, wounded him, but he escaped into the ravines." He squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry about our wedding." "Don't be ridiculous," she chided gently. "We'll marry when you're healed and Harmon is captured." "That could be weeks," he protested. "Then it's weeks," Madeline said firmly. "I've waited 30 years to find you, Owen Mitchell. I can wait a little longer to make it official." A smile touched his lips. "You're extraordinary, you know that?" "I'm practical," she corrected, "and very much in love with you, injured leg and all." Their lips met in a tender kiss, reaffirming their connection and commitment despite the obstacles still before them. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Owen's injury, while painful, began to heal steadily under Singing Bird's care. The Crow healer stayed in town, sleeping on a pallet in Eleanor's room and dividing her time between treating Owen and fascinating the school children with demonstrations of traditional crafts. Meanwhile, the hunt for Jack Harmon continued. Patrols regularly reported sightings, but the wily rancher evaded capture, slipping through the hills and ravines he knew so well. The entire region remained on alert, with townsfolk traveling in groups and keeping weapons close at hand. Despite the ongoing threat, life in Silver Creek gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. Owen, once he could move with crutches, began helping at the school, teaching the older boys woodworking skills, while Madeline and Eleanor handled academic subjects. His presence became a natural part of the schoolhouse routine, his quiet strength and patience winning over even the most reluctant students. In the evenings, the 3 adults would sit in the parlor, planning lessons, sharing stories, or simply enjoying each other's company. Eleanor, ever perceptive, often found reasons to retire early, giving Owen and Madeline precious time alone together. During these quiet moments, they spoke of their future, the life they would build together once Harmon was captured and Owen could safely return to his land. Madeline suggested converting part of the cabin into a small schoolroom where she could teach children from neighboring homesteads, allowing her to continue her profession while living with Owen. "We could add rooms to the cabin," Owen proposed one evening as they sat before the fire. "Make it a proper home for a family." The implication wasn't lost on Madeline. "Children?" she asked softly. His expression warmed. "If you want them. I've never thought much about being a father, but with you—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "With you, I can see it. Our children running in the meadow, learning to ride, growing up wild and free like I never could." The vision he painted touched her deeply. "I'd like that," she admitted, "though perhaps we should get married first." Owen laughed, the sound warming the room. "Practical as always. Their wedding plans, postponed but not abandoned, resumed as Owen's recovery progressed. The town minister visited regularly, discussing ceremony details and offering spiritual guidance through their unusual circumstances. A new date was set for 3 weeks hence, by which time Owen expected to walk without crutches. But fate and Jack Harmon had other plans. 2 days before the rescheduled wedding, as Madeline was walking home from the general store with supplies for the celebration, a rough hand seized her arm, yanking her into the narrow alley between buildings. Before she could scream, something hard pressed against her temple. "Not a sound," a harsh voice growled in her ear. "Or I put a bullet in your pretty head right here." Terror froze her blood as she recognized Jack Harmon from descriptions she'd heard. Gaunt and wild-eyed, with several days' growth of beard and a blood-stained bandage visible beneath his coat sleeve, he looked like a man with nothing left to lose. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Mitchell," he snarled. "He took everything from me, my brother, my reputation, my freedom. Now I'm taking what matters to him." The gun pressed harder. "You're coming with me, and if you want to live, you'll do exactly as I say." Harmon forced her toward a horse tied at the back of the alley, keeping the gun at her back and a hand clamped over her mouth whenever anyone passed nearby. With brutal efficiency, he bound her hands, gagged her, and hauled her onto the horse, mounting behind her. As they rode out of town by back routes, avoiding the main streets where cavalry patrols might spot them, Madeline's mind raced. Owen would soon discover her missing. He would come for her, she knew this with bone-deep certainty. But in his injured state, facing a desperate man like Harmon, fear for him eclipsed even her own terror. Somehow, she had to find a way to survive this ordeal without leading Owen into a trap that might cost him his life. Harmon rode hard, pushing the horse to its limits. By nightfall, they had reached a remote area Madeline didn't recognize: rocky hills with sparse vegetation and numerous caves and crevices. Perfect hiding places for a man on the run. He dragged her from the horse outside a small cave, removing her gag but leaving her hands bound. "Inside," he ordered, waving the gun. The cave was shallow but dry, with evidence of recent habitation, a bedroll, the remains of a small fire, some provisions. Harmon pushed her to sit against the rock wall, then busied himself preparing a meager meal, all while keeping the gun within easy reach. "Why are you doing this?" Madeline asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Taking me won't restore what you've lost." Harmon's laugh was ugly. "This isn't about restoration, school teacher. It's about justice. Mitchell took my life from me. Now I'll take his. By hurting me, that's not justice, it's cowardice." His hand moved faster than she could react, striking her across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. Stars exploded in her vision, and she tasted blood from her split lip. "You don't talk," Harmon growled. "You sit there and wait. Mitchell will come for you, we both know that. And when he does, I'll be waiting." Understanding dawned with horrible clarity. She wasn't just a hostage, she was bait. Harmon had no intention of ransoming her or using her as leverage to escape. He wanted Owen to come, to walk into a trap where Harmon could kill him. As night fell, Harmon bound her ankles as well, allowing her to lie down on the hard cave floor, but ensuring she couldn't escape. He positioned himself near the entrance, gun in hand, occasionally dozing, but never deeply enough that she could risk movement. Cold, frightened, and increasingly desperate, Madeline fought to stay calm. Owen would come, there was no doubt of that. But he wouldn't come alone, and he wouldn't come unprepared. She had to believe that. Had to trust in his intelligence and skill, even with his injured leg. As dawn broke, Harmon grew increasingly agitated, pacing the small cave and muttering to himself. Madeline watched him carefully, recognizing the signs of a man unraveling. His eyes were feverish, his movements erratic. The wound in his arm, inadequately treated, was likely infected, contributing to his deteriorating mental state. "He should have found us by now," Harmon muttered, peering out of the cave entrance. "Those crow trackers of his, they're good. Too good." "Perhaps they went in a different direction," Madeline suggested, hoping to sow doubt and buy time. Harmon whirled on her. "Shut up! He'll come! He has to come!" His hand tightened on the gun. And if he doesn't, the unfinished threat hung in the air between them. If Owen didn't come, or didn't come soon enough, Harmon might simply kill her out of frustration or mounting madness. Hours passed with excruciating slowness. Midday came and went, the sun beating down on the rocky landscape outside their cave. Harmon grew increasingly agitated, alternating between angry pacing and silent, watchful stillness. Then, in the early afternoon, a sound reached them, the distant but distinct noise of an approaching horse. Harmon's face twisted into a triumphant smile. There he is, right on schedule. He grabbed Madeline, hauling her to her feet despite her bound ankles. Time for your reunion, school teacher. He dragged her to the cave entrance, positioning her in front of him as a shield, the gun pressed to her temple once more. Call to him, he ordered. Tell him you're here. Madeline hesitated, her mind racing. If she called out, Owen would come directly into Harmon's line of fire. If she refused, Harmon might shoot her immediately. Do it, Harmon hissed, digging the gun barrel painfully against her skin. Drawing a deep breath, Madeline called out, but not what Harmon expected. Owen, it's a trap. He's got a gun to my head. Harmon cursed violently, striking her with the gun and sending her sprawling to the ground. But the damage was done. The approaching hoofbeats stopped abruptly. Mitchell, Harmon shouted, stepping partially out of the cave entrance. I know you're out there. Show yourself, or she dies right now. Silence greeted his demand. Then, from somewhere to their left, Owen's voice called back, calm and steady. Let her go, Harmon. It's over. The cavalry's surrounding this area as we speak. You're lying, Harmon shouted, eyes wild as he scanned the rocky terrain. There's no one here but you. Look to the ridge behind you, Owen replied. Despite himself, Harmon turned slightly just enough to see the glint of sunlight on a rifle barrel atop the ridge overlooking the cave, and another, further along, and a third. You're surrounded, Owen continued. There's no way out except surrender. Madeline, still on the ground where she'd fallen, saw the change in Harmon's face the moment when desperate anger gave way to the knowledge of defeat. But instead of surrender, his expression hardened into something more dangerous, the look of a man with nothing left to lose. If I'm finished, he said, voice eerily calm, then so is she. He turned toward Madeline, raising his gun. In that instant, a shot rang out, but not from Harmon's weapon. The rancher staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face, as a red stain blossomed on his chest. He took one faltering step forward, then collapsed. Owen appeared seemingly from nowhere, moving with surprising speed despite his injured leg. He kicked Harmon's fallen gun away, checked the man's pulse, then immediately turned to Madeline. Are you hurt? He asked urgently, cutting the ropes that bound her with his hunting knife. No, she managed, though her lip was still bleeding and her face bruised from Harmon's blow. Just frightened. How did you find me? Followed your trail, he said simply, helping her to her feet and pulling her into his arms. Singing Bird taught me a few tricks, and I had help. As if on cue, several figures appeared, 2 Crow warriors, including Grey Wolf and Captain Thornton, with 2 of his men. Harmon, the captain asked, approaching the fallen man. Dead, Owen confirmed. Grey Wolf shot. He was about to kill Madeline. The captain nodded grimly. Clean kill, defending an innocent. No one will question it. He turned to Madeline. Are you all right, Miss Hayes? Do you need medical attention? I'm fine, she assured him, though she kept a tight grip on Owen's arm. I just want to go home. Home it is, Owen agreed, his arm secure around her waist. Though you might have to help me with the ride back. This leg wasn't quite ready for tracking expeditions. Only then did Madeline notice how heavily he was leaning on her, and the fresh blood stain on his bandaged leg. Owen, you've reopened your wound. He smiled weakly. Worth it? Captain Thornton arranged for Madeline to ride double with one of his men, while Owen rode with another, his injured leg carefully positioned. The journey back to Silver Creek was slow, but mercifully uneventful. By the time they reached town, word of their return and Harmon's demise had spread, drawing a crowd of concerned citizens. Eleanor was waiting at the schoolhouse, her relief palpable as she embraced Madeline tightly. When Owen realized you were missing, I thought my heart would stop, she confessed. And then, when he insisted on joining the search party, injured as he is, he saved my life, Madeline said simply, watching as the soldiers helped Owen inside. Again. That night, After Singing Bird had treated both Madeline's facial injuries and Owen's reopened leg wound, they sat together in the parlor, reluctant to be separated even for sleep. Eleanor had tactfully retired early, leaving them alone with their thoughts and emotions. "I've never been so frightened," Owen admitted, his hand clasping Madeline's. "When I realized Harmon had taken you, I knew you would come," she said softly. "Never doubted it for a moment." His eyes, when they met hers, were filled with emotion. "I'll always come for you, Madeline. Wherever you are, whatever happens, I'll find you." "I know." She leaned against his shoulder, careful of his injuries. "And I'll always wait for you to find me." They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment. The crackling fire and distant night sounds the only accompaniment to their thoughts. Finally, Owen spoke again. "I don't want to wait any longer to marry you," he said, his voice low but determined. "Life's too uncertain, too precious." Madeline smiled against his shoulder. "I was thinking the same thing, though you're hardly in condition for a wedding ceremony." "Don't need fancy ceremonies," he argued gently. "Just need you, me, a minister, and 2 witnesses. Everything else is just decoration." Looking up at him, this man who had saved her life multiple times, who had fought through injury and danger to find her, who had shown her through actions rather than words, the depth of his commitment, Madeline felt a certainty settle over her like a warm blanket. "Tomorrow," she said decisively. "We'll send for the minister first thing in the morning. Eleanor and Grey Wolf can be our witnesses. No more waiting." Owen's smile lit his entire face. "Tomorrow," he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that spoke of all they had survived together and all they would build in the years to come. The wedding of Owen Mitchell and Madeline Hayes took place the following afternoon in the schoolhouse parlor. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful, with Eleanor and Grey Wolf standing as witnesses while the town minister officiated. Madeline wore her best blue dress, adorned with wildflowers Grey Wolf's sister had gathered that morning. Owen, despite his injured leg, stood tall and proud, his eyes never leaving Madeline's face as they spoke their vows. "In sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death parts us," they promised each other, the traditional words carrying extra weight after all they had already endured together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The small gathering of friends expanded to include Sheriff Cooper, Captain Thornton, and several of the Crow who had helped in Madeline's rescue, erupted in cheers. "Mrs. Mitchell," Owen whispered against her ear as they embraced. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Madeline replied, her heart so full it felt it might burst. The celebration continued into the evening, with townspeople stopping by to offer congratulations and well wishes. By the time the last guest departed, leaving the newlyweds alone at last, both Owen and Madeline were exhausted but radiantly happy. Eleanor, in a final act of thoughtfulness, had arranged to stay with Mrs. Abernathy for the night, giving them the schoolhouse to themselves. Though Owen's injury limited their wedding night somewhat, the intimacy they shared, finally free to express their love fully, was all the more precious for the challenges they had overcome to reach this moment. As they lay together in the quiet darkness, Madeline's head resting on Owen's chest, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her ear, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. "I never expected any of this," she murmured. "When I set out for Silver Creek, I thought I was just seeking a new beginning, a way to support myself. And I never expected to find a woman collapsed at the edge of the prairie who would change my entire life," Owen replied, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Seems we were both seeking something without knowing exactly what it was. And we found each other instead," Madeline concluded. "The best kind of unexpected discovery," Owen agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. As spring turned to summer, Owen's leg healed completely, allowing them to make plans for their return to his land. The cabin had been maintained by the Crow during his absence, but there was work to be done to expand it for their future together. Madeline fulfilled her teaching contract through the end of the school year, with Eleanor's blessing and support. The 2 women had formed a friendship that both knew would endure despite the coming separation. "You must visit us," Madeline insisted as they packed her belongings. "Whenever you wish. There will always be a place for you in our home." "I will," Eleanor promised, "though not too soon. Newlyweds deserved their privacy. By midsummer, the expanded cabin was ready, a proper bedroom added, the main room enlarged, a small classroom built onto one side, where Madeline could teach the children of neighboring homesteaders. Owen's horses thrived under his care, his breeding program expanding as his reputation for quality animals spread throughout the territory. Their happiness was complete the following spring, when Madeline discovered she was expecting their first child. Owen's reaction, equal parts joy, wonder, and protective concern, confirmed what she already knew. He would be an extraordinary father. A son or daughter, he marveled, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. Our child, Madeline, a piece of both of us. The piece that completes our family, she agreed, covering his hand with her own. When their daughter was born that winter, a strong, healthy girl with Owen's blue eyes and Madeline's determined spirit, they named her Hope, a testament to the faith that had sustained them through their journey together. As Madeline sat in the rocking chair Owen had crafted, nursing their infant daughter while watching him tend the fire, she reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her here. A missed stagecoach, a collapse at the prairie's edge, a cowboy who lifted her not just from the ground but from a life of solitude into one filled with love. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About how close we came to never finding each other," she replied honestly. "If I hadn't missed that stagecoach, if you hadn't been tracking those Mustangs that day..." Owen moved to kneel beside her chair, one hand gently touching their daughter's downy head, the other finding Madeline's. "Some things are meant to be," he said simply. "I didn't believe that before I found you. Now I can't imagine believing anything else." As Hope drifted to sleep in her arms, Madeline leaned forward to kiss her husband, her heart full of gratitude for the man who had found her at the edge of the prairie and, in lifting her from the ground, had discovered the missing piece of his own heart just as she had found hers in him. Together, they had built a life neither could have imagined, alone a testament to the power of unexpected meetings, courageous hearts, and love that defies all odds. In the vast expanse of the Montana Territory, they had found in each other the greatest treasure of all, a home not made of logs and nails, but of shared dreams, mutual respect, and enduring love. And that, Madeline knew, was worth every hardship they had endured to find it.